He walked with a limp. His jacket was frayed, his rifle older than some of the recruits. They laughed when he stepped onto the range. "Grandpa's here to cosplay," one joked. Then came the shot, smooth, silent. It cut the bullseye clean, and the colonel stood up, eyes wide, voice low. "That's Blue Viper." His name was Raiden Quinn, 68 years old, tall and lean, with short silver hair and a weathered face marked by deep lines. A thin beard that had gone completely gray, walked with a slight limp, the result of shrapnel in his left leg from a mission nobody talks about. Anamori wore a faded military surplus jacket, sleeves patched with careful stitches. Over his shoulder hung a classic wooden M4001 rifle. No electronic scope, no laser sights, no modern attachments, just iron sights and decades of muscle memory. It was a Tuesday morning at Fort Jackson's mixed military civilian training facility, kind of place where active duty soldiers train alongside weekend warriors and shooting enthusiasts. A group of young recruits was preparing for qualification test, fresh Vaseski attitudes and state-of-the-art equipment. When they saw Raiden walk up to the registration desk, the snickers started immediately. Did the museum lose one of its mannequins? Gonna dislocate something pulling that bolt? $20, says he can't even load it properly. Raiden didn't respond, didn't even look their way, just nodded politely to the range officer, placed his weathered military ID on the disc and waited his turn. The range officer, a veteran himself, glanced at the ID and did a double take, but he didn't say anything, just handed Raiden his lane assignment and safety briefing. A young sergeant named Miller leaned over to his buddy. "Won't even hit paper from 50 yards. Look at those hands shaking." His friend laughed. "Maybe we should call his grandson to come pick him up." Another recruit was already recording on his phone. "This is gonna be hilarious. Old man thinks he's still in World War II." Raiden heard every word. His face remained expressionless. "Heard worse, much worse." He simply walked to his assigned lane, set down his rifle case, and began his preparation ritual, the same ritual he'd performed thousands of times over for decades of service. Check the chamber, inspect the barrel, clean the iron sights with a soft cloth, load exactly 5 rounds, no more, no less. The recruits were still laughing behind him, making jokes about safety concerns and liability insurance, but something about Raiden's methodical movements got the attention of one person in the observation area. Colonel Marcus Stone, 26 years of active duty, seen enough shooters to recognize something the recruits couldn't: the way Raiden held his rifle, the way he moved, the absolute stillness in his shoulder. Stone leaned forward in his shy and whispered to his aide, "This is going to be interesting to Act 1. Comment: never judge by age, only by aim." Raiden stepped up to the firing line. No shooting rest, no bipod, no support of any kind. He took a deep breath and assumed a standing position, feet shoulder width apart, left hand supporting the rifles for stock, right hand gripping but not squeezing the stock. The range officer offered him a modern scope. "Sir, would you like to use one of our electronic sights? Might help with precision." Raiden shook his head slowly. "Only ever trusted one scope, and I don't need it today." The recruits behind him were getting louder, phones were coming out. This was going to be content gold. "He's shooting standing without support at 100 meters. This is painful to watch. Simone should stop him before he embarrasses himself." Raiden ignored them completely, raised the rifle to his shoulder. The weapon seemed to settle into his hands like it belonged there, like it had been waiting 40 years to come home. His breathing slowed, his heartbeat steady, at the tremor in his hands completely disappeared. For 10 seconds he stood motionless, reading the wind, feeling the air pressure, recalculating factors that electronic scopes and computer programs could never understand. Then he fired. The gunshot cracked across the range like thunder at the 100-meter mark. The bullseye target didn't just show a hit, it showed perfection. The bullet had struck dead center and continued through to create a perfect X-shaped cut in the paper, not a hole. A precise, deliberate slash that looked like it had been made with a razor blade, the signature mark of someone they used to call Blue Viper. The entire range went silent. You could hear the wind through the trees. You could hear someone's water bottle hitting the floor. You could hear hearts beating faster. One of the range instructors stood up from his tablino. "Damn way, Miller." The young sergeant who'd been laughing the loudest stared at the target through binoculars. His hands were shaking. That's not possible, not from that distance, not standing, not with iron sights. But it was the reaction from the observation area that changed everything. Colonel Stone had slowly risen from his chair. His face had gone completely pale. He was staring at Raiden with A mixture of disbelief and recognition turned to his aid and whispered, but in the silence of the range Ivorion heard him. That's him, that's Blue Viper. The name hit the range like an electric shock. Blue Viper. Some of the older instructors knew that name, whispered about in certain circles, a ghost story, a legend that most people thought was just military folklore. Raiden calmly ejected the spent casing, shouldered his rifle and turned to walk away. No celebration, no acknowledgement of the perfect shot, no response to the stunned faces around him, just silence. As he passed the group of recruits, Miller stammered, "Siri, we didn't know." Raiden paused, looked at the young man with eyes that had seen things no 20-year-old could imagine. "Essen," he said quietly, "next time ask before you assume." And then he walked away, leaving behind a range full of Pluho finally understood he just witnessed something extraordinary. The video that Miller had been recording, one that was supposed to be a joke, went viral within hours. The caption read, "He didn't know who he was until the target splits." The act to comment, "He didn't miss and he didn't stay." Blue Viper wasn't just a nickname, it was a classification, a designation reserved for the most elite snipers in special operations. Raiden Quinn had earned that name over 15 years of classified missions that didn't officially exist, operations that were never documented, targets that were never confirmed. Trained over 200 elite marksmen, Soldero went on to become legends in their own right, but none of them ever matched the original. These stories about Blue Viper were the kind that got told in whispers and around base camps. They said he could shoot from a moving helicopter while it was changing direction. They said could identify targets by the sound of wind moving through leaves. They said once held off an entire enemy battalion for 6 hours using only 12 bullets. But the story that made him a legend happened in Afghanistan 2003. A rescue operation had gone wrong. A team of Navy SEALs was pinned down in a valley surrounded by enemy fighters. Air support was 40 minutes away, too far to let. Raiden was positioned on a ridge 800 meters away. For 27 minutes he provided cover. Furioni shot 1 kill over and over. Each bullet perfectly placed, each target eliminated before they could advance on the trapped SEALs. When the helicopters finally arrived, they found 23 enemy fighters dead, all from single headshots, all from impossible angles and distances. SEALs made it home, every single one. That night Raiden's commanding officer asked him how he'd done it. Sir Raiden replied, "He just kept pulling the trigger until our boys were safe." But the legend of Blue Viper ended as suddenly as it began in 2005 during a mission in Somalia. Raiden's spotter and closest friend, Staff Sergeant David Chen, was killed by an IAD that should never have been there. Intelligence failure, poor reconnaissance, a mistake that cost a good man his life. Raiden carried Chen's body back to the extraction point, miles through enemy territory. Along when he got back to base, he walked into his commander's office, placed his rifle on the desk. "I'm done," he said simply. "Queen, you can't just." "I'm done, sir." He refused the Medal of Honor they wanted to give him, refused the promotion to Master Sergeant, refused the comfortable desk job at the Pentagon. He just disappeared for 20 years. Nobody knew where Blue Viper had gone until a Tuesday morning at Fort Jackson, when a video started spreading through military social media. Caption that went with Miller's recording read, "Old man shows up at range, owing soldiers laugh, then this happens." Within 48 hours the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Comment section was filled with people who recognized the name of veterans who remembered the story, soldiers who'd heard the whispers. "That's Blue Viper. Holy shit, me instructor told me about this. We thought it was just a myth. Trained my unit commander said he was the best shooter who ever lived." A week later, Miller and 3 of his fellow recruits drove to Raiden's address, a small cabin in the mountains outside town. They came to apologize. Miller knocked on the door. When Raiden answered, the young sergeant's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, I didn't know who you were. I should have shut up." Raiden looked at the 4 young Fasas kids, really scared kids who'd made a mistake. He said gently, "Don't be sorry, just learn who not to laugh at before you know how they aim." He invited them in for coffee, spent 2 hours teaching them about breathing techniques and wind calculation. When they left, Miller asked, "Sir, would you consider coming back training recruits properly?" Raiden smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from him in years. He never really left Sony, just got quieter. Range at Fort Jackson was officially renowned 2 months later. They called it the Quinn Line. The inscription read, "Silence isn't weakness, sometimes it's just confidence." Sector Act 3 comment, "You don't laugh at legends, you listen to theme." After that day, Raiden refused every interview, request every documentary, a fear of re-invitation to military ceremonies and veteran events. He just wanted to be left alone. A young female recruit named Sarah Martinez later told a story about seeing him at the range in quiet afternoons. He'd sit on this old wooden bench, said, cleaning his rifle while the sun went down. Never said much to anyone, but if you asked him a question about shooting, spend hours teaching you. Another trainee mentioned that Raiden would sometimes leave small notes on the targets after particularly difficult shooting. Exercise, simple messages: breathe first, aim second, fire laster. Your rifle is only as steady as your heart. The local newspaper wanted to do a feature story about the legendary marksman living among us. Raiden sent back a handwritten note: put up the story if you want, but don't put my picture. The shooting community started calling him Professor, not because he talked a lot, but because every word he spoke was worth remembering. Young shooters would drive from hundreds of miles away hoping to catch a glimpse of Blue Viper in action. Most left disappointed. Raiden rarely shot when others were watching, but occasionally, just occasionally, he'd step up to the line, and when he did, perfection followed. The range officers started a tradition: whenever Raiden achieved a perfect score, they'd ring a small bell mounted near the registration desk. Ring for each perfect shot. On good days you'd hear that bell ring 5 times in a row. On exceptional days, it would ring all afternoon. The sound became known as Viper's Bell. When new recruits asked what it meant, the instructors would smile and say it means someone just remembered how to shoot properly. Raiden never asked for recognition, never sought attention, ever tried to reclaim his place in military history. Just showed up quietly, constantly. And when he really shot, entire range would stop and watch, not because they wanted to see a show, but because they wanted to witness excellence, a pure, undiluted excellence of the kind that only comes from decades of dedication, from countless hours of practice, from a level of skill that can't be taught and earned. Raiden Quinn had earned it, and now, in the twilight of his life, he was sharing it, one perfect shot at a time. Ekta asked for comment. He never spoke loud, but his shot spoke for him. Raiden Quinn didn't walk into that range to prove anything, he just walked in. And when the room left, had let the rifle answer in a world that rushes to judge by appearances. Waited, aimed, fired once. That's all it took. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to wear your achievements on your sleeve. You don't need to announce your credentials to every person you meet. So metames, you just need to wait for the right moment and then hit center. The young soldiers who laughed that day learned something more valuable than marksmanship. They learned about respect, about humility, about the danger of assumptions. They learned that legends don't always look legendary. Sometimes they look like tired old men with frayed jackets and weathered handsome. At times, they walk with a limp and carry old rifles. Sometimes they sit quietly in the back until someone needs to see what excellence really looks like. Raiden Quinn spent 40 years earning the right to that one perfect shot, 40 years of training, of sacrifice, of missions that pushed him beyond human limits, 40 years of being Blue Viper, and in the end, when it mattered most, when respect was on the line and legends were being tested, he delivered. One shot, dead center, game over, because that's what legends do. They don't make excuses. They don't make noise. They just make the shot.